Is this thing working? I don't see it working. That don't mean it ain't. See if I can see myself. Huh. I can hear myself. See it working. That don't mean it ain't. That's strange. All right, well, this is my first time using this. I'm using a different thing to try to live stream here, this Rumble Studio. So let me see if I can make some adjustments. Stop media within, blocking it, pop-up windows, allow. Maybe that's what's causing things. Stop media within. Let me go into locals, see if you folks on locals can see me. Let me go into locals, see if you folks on locals can see me. All right, well, something is not working right. Wonder why. Let's try to disable the camera and then re-enable the camera. Solo. There we go. All right. Well, there's always a learning curve with these sorts of things, aren't there, folks? You folks on locals, can you see me now? Adele says she can't see me. Can she? You can't see me? It should kick in any second now. I'm using a new streaming thing here. So we're on Rumble, locals, and YouTube. And I thought I'd try something new. What we'll do is we will allow outside folks to join us for about 20 minutes. And then we'll shut it down. We'll do like we always do and go to supporters only for locals. And then it'll be, the rest of the live streams will be for locals only folks. So if you'd like to join us for the second half of the conversation, when we talk about all the controversial stuff and the more private stuff, you got to be a supporter on our locals community in order to do that. We're going to do kind of an abbreviated show today. First of all, I apologize. We usually do this at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time on Mondays. Today I had some other things to do, and so we weren't able to do it at that time. Hence the later time here today. How are you doing, Adele? Remember, so anybody joining us, if you're on locals, I want you to know that we are live streaming right now to YouTube and also Rumble in addition to locals. So we're going to save all the more private conversations for a little bit here. And then just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. We're not just on locals currently. We will be here in about 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. Adele says she's okay. Let me ask you, Adele, are you getting this second whiff of winter that I'm getting here where I'm at? Yesterday it was summer. Today it's absolutely winter, and actually there was snow today. No accumulation, but some snow flurries. It's kind of like winter's last hurrah, I guess. You experiencing any of that where you're at? I'll tell you, this Rumble setup is pretty nice. It's actually really got a lot of wonderful tools. I can stream in one place and it ends up in different places. Adele says that she did on the weekend, but today was 25 degrees, very warm. Well, then you ain't talking in Fahrenheit. You're talking in Celsius. What is that? Let's see. 25 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit. 77 degrees. Yeah, that's a nice summer-like day. Have you done time change yet? By the way, I realize that my face is red here. I'm having an allergic reaction right here. So I realize I look ridiculous with like all my face here red, but it's some kind of allergic reaction I'm having. Don't mind it. Don't let it distract from the serious things we've got to talk about today. You have not done time change. Who else do we got in here? I see we've got somebody on. We got several people on locals, and we've got somebody on YouTube. So chat at me, say hello. Here's the thought. Like I said, I'm learning this new streaming service here. So I was kind of anxious to get to try this today. That's why I didn't want to miss out on the live stream. But it's going to be kind of a shortened live stream today. I've got so many things to do, but I didn't want to leave this out. I wanted to share this story with you. I was just telling somebody about this just a few minutes ago, that I was reviewing a tent the other day. And so it made me think of the work we do with emotional health and authentic recovery and those sorts of things. You might be wondering, how does setting up a tent, what's that got to do with recovery and all that? Well, so for this review, I took this tent out into this field and I started setting this tent up. And of course, it was a windy day. So the wind's blowing this tent all over creation and everything. And I caught myself saying to myself, if this wind would just stop blowing, it would make it a whole lot easier for me to set up this tent. This wind is ruining my video. This video that I'm making to show people this tent and how to set up this tent and all these things. And then it occurred to me, if somebody watching this video says to themselves, I want to buy that tent and I want to take that tent out into the woods, a perfectly calm day for my video would not reflect real world conditions very well, would it? It's not like if you're out in the woods, like you're out in the backcountry, that the wind says, oh, well, I shouldn't blow because he's trying to set up his tent. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, in order for my video to be more reflective of real world conditions, I should have been more than willing for that wind to be blowing and complicating things for me, because that makes the video real. That reflects real life, right? So instead of me wishing that the wind isn't blowing, I should have been happy that the wind was blowing, because that reflects real world conditions. So if somebody's interested in that tent, this is really what you're going to have to be dealing with out in the woods somewhere while you're trying to set this tent up. Some of you might now understand where I'm getting at with this. In recovery, when we're working on ourselves and, we're working on our attitudes and things like that, or working with relationships, how to interact with people and relationships, we might catch ourselves thinking from time to time, you know what? If only my circumstances were different, or if only this person wasn't creating these challenges for me, or if only I had this, or if only that weren't happening. You ever catch yourself thinking that way? But then you got to ask yourself, is that though real world conditions? So if my recovery, the things that I'm good at in with my emotional health are dependent on my circumstances being a certain way before I have any success or I'm successful at managing my life, uh, then have I really recovered? I mean, am I really growing at all? You see, the real growth depends on real world conditions. How do I think about this situation? How do I manage myself given these circumstances? That's what is the real measure of emotional growth and development and those sorts of things, recovery. So something to think about there. Think about that tent and about how I caught myself thinking, boy, this wind is complicating things. Why doesn't the wind just go away? Well, when you're setting up a tent out in the real world on a backpacking trip or something, those are the kinds of conditions you're really going to face. Um, we've talked in the past about how when I was learning Spanish, when I was learning the Spanish language, I could, and I did, spend hours, hours every day studying the grammar, memorizing vocabulary. I would do this in the privacy of like my apartment, and all day at work, I would be memorizing vocabulary. I used to carry these 3x5 index cards in my shirt pocket. And so no matter what my work was, right out in the middle of my work day, I could just pull these 3x5 index cards and I could review my vocabulary. And I would go home and I would be in my apartment and I would be imagining like myself in a conversation with somebody who speaks Spanish. And all those things are great. But do you know that no growth happened? Like I didn't get good at the language until I went out into the real world and really tried to speak Spanish with people who really speak Spanish. There was what would seem very simple in my apartment in my imagination while I'm having like an imaginary conversation with some imaginary Latino in my brain was a lot different than when I would go out into the real world and actually speak with somebody for real. There was nothing that strengthened my language skills as much as that part of the thing. But that's the scariest part, isn't it? It's the scariest part. It's the most challenging part, is actually going and doing it for real. So think about the challenges in your circumstances and in your life like that when you're working on yourself. Say that you struggle with your temper, your behaviors when you're mad. Let's say that that's a struggle for you. You might look at every time you fail as being this big old horrible terrible thing. But is it? It depends on how you look at it. If you look at it after you fail as, wow, this is fantastic because it's an opportunity for me to analyze what went wrong, to make some improvements, and to learn from this, right? Make adjustments and learn and grow. Or you can look at it afterwards as just I'm a failure and this is just more proof that I'm completely worthless and those sorts of things. So think about that it's these real world situations, real interactions with people, real failures, and these sorts of things that ultimately lead to growth. So that's what I wanted to share with y'all to get the conversation started. I see some more people have joined us. How y'all doing? If you're on YouTube or Rumble, or if you're on Locals, say hi to me. Type to me in the chat there. Depending on the platform you're on, there might be like a comment section, and then there might be an entirely different section that's for chat, like the live chat. Try to make sure you're there in the live chat if you can. I see there's several people on Rumble. This is new for me, using this streaming service by Rumble, which is fantastic, by the way. I really dig it. Let me see what you guys have to say. While I'm waiting, I'm going to go on my phone and just see if I'm missing anything. So for example, I'm going to go into our locals group here on my phone and see if I can see what you guys see. If I'm missing anything. There's like a slight delay. So for example, I'm going to go into our locals group here on my phone. Ivan, thank you so much. Zikmat, nice to see you. Ivan, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that very, very much. I'm glad that you're here. This is the first time that I've typically. So here's. Let me repeat this for all yins who weren't here before. Typically, we do live streams exclusively on our locals community. That's going to continue, except it used to be on locals. What we would do is for the first 30 minutes, we would leave it open to all members. And then the second half of the live stream, we would close down for supporters only. So what I'm thinking about doing, just to make this more accessible to greater numbers of people, is that we'll do the live stream for the first 20 minutes or so to everybody, even outside of locals. That includes Rumble, it includes YouTube. Then when we would typically just go to the members only for locals, we will still do that after about 20 minutes or so. And what that means, I reckon, is that I'll just shut down the Rumble feed and the YouTube feed and continue the feed on locals. I think that's the way I can do that. So it's nice to see you guys in the chat there. What else is on everybody's mind? What are you guys dealing with this week? How was your weekends? And what we might do is we might just continue the stream for everybody for this first stream like this first stream that is streaming to the other platforms as well, just to allow me to get a good feel for it and all that. Of course, because I'm a little off the schedule, the dogs are off the schedule too. They're usually quiet and restrained for our live streams, but our live streams usually happen at 3:30 in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. And here where I'm at, it's now 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So they've been fed, but their schedules are all off. Now they're all awake. They're chewing on bones. They're slurping the water bowl over there and all sorts of crazy things. Let me ask you this. What is fundamentally wrong with a person, maybe you, who thinks to himself or herself, I want to control my anxiety? What's wrong with that? I want to control my anxiety. So this would be like you sitting around thinking like, man, when I get into these certain situations. My anxiety goes off the chart. I want to learn how to control my anxiety. Let's see what you folks have to say. Adele says, weekend was okay. I was working on Sunday, have a lot going on personally. So being in work is easier at the moment. I understand that. It kind of keeps you focused on other things, right? Sick Matt says, I want to ask you something that I've been having a hard time with this week. Could you give practical examples of how you deal with feelings of regret? Well, regret is a really nice feeling. Hello there, Mr. Trashy. Interesting username you've got there on YouTube. Yeah, Zick Matt, I think regret is a wonderful feeling, to be honest with you, because regret is, it's not guilt. It's not shame. It's not any of those things. So the first thing I would ask you to do is do a self-analysis to determine if what you're really feeling is regret, because regret doesn't feel bad. Shame feels bad. Guilt feels bad. But regret doesn't feel bad. And a lot of times the folks I talk to are very good at confusing shame for lots of other negative emotions. Like a person might think that they're feeling just regret when really it's shame. Or a person might believe that they're feeling guilt when it's actually shame. In fact, among people I talk to, 99% of the time when they say they're feeling guilty about something, they're actually talking about shame. So that would be the first thing. First thing would be to analyze if really what you're feeling is regret. Now, about regret, here's what I'll say about it. I like it because it doesn't feel bad. For example, when I think about the way that the American Indian was treated, I regret a lot of the things that happened back then with the American Indian. But I wasn't alive then. I'm not responsible for any of that. There's no changing it. Like I can't go back in a time machine and prevent it from happening. So there's no reason for me to feel guilty about what happened to the American Indian. There's no reason for me to feel shame about what happened to the American Indian, because there's never a reason to feel shame directed toward ourselves, period, no matter what circumstances we're talking about. But regret, can I regret it? Yeah, because it's simply me feeling that I wish things could have been different, but I recognize that they couldn't be. To make it more personal, let's talk about, the things that resulted in the destruction of my marriage and everything that went down there. This is back 14 years now. I already went through the guilt of it, already eliminated the shame around it. What am I living with now regarding everything I did back then, all the things the ways I behaved, the consequences I suffered, the harm that I caused others? What is it that I live with? Regret. In other words, knowing what I know now, I would love to be able to go back in a time machine and change that, but I can't. So it's just something I live with. When that memory comes up in my mind and I think back to that, I regret that happened at all. At the same time, I don't entirely regret that it happened, because if it had not happened, I wouldn't be where I'm at now, emotionally healthy. So what I really regret then is not that it happened. I regret that it had to happen. Am I helping at all, Zickmat, or am I making it even worse? When I think back to my personal experiences, that led to me, my borderline personality disorder crisis. What a terrible time that was. What a terrible time. And the years following they were just excruciating. I don't feel guilty about them. I'll tell you why I don't feel guilty about them. Guilt has a specific purpose. What is the purpose of guilt? The purpose of guilt is to bring about change. That is the purpose of guilt. Once guilt serves its purpose, it doesn't continue to exist. It doesn't continue to dog a person for years and years. This is why when I hear these stories about like soldiers who went to war, saw terrible things, did terrible things, and they come back, and then sometimes 30, 40 years later, they're still talking about, or they believe that they're still affected by the guilt of that experience. We know that's not guilt because they're not still doing those things. See, if it were guilt, once guilt has served its purpose, so let's say that I steal a pack of chewing gum from a grocery store. I steal the pack of chewing gum, and later I feel guilty about that. Well, what are the feelings trying to tell me? They're trying to tell me that what I did was wrong. Not what I am is wrong, not who I am is wrong, but what I did is wrong. The thing I did is wrong. So the guilt then helps me say to myself, well, what I did was wrong, so I'm not going to do that anymore. I make the change, and then the guilt goes away because I'm not still doing that. Shame never goes away because shame doesn't say that what you did is wrong. Shame says that you are wrong. You're the problem. So it will continue to dog you forever and ever, and it's sly. So it makes you think that you're feeling bad about the thing you did or didn't do, when what you're really doing is you're using what you did or didn't do as proof that you're the problem. So it doesn't go away because you're going to always be you. Regret, on the other hand, can last your lifetime because it's something you look back on and wish could have been different. But beyond that, there's no negative feelings attached to it. Like, regret isn't feeling bad about yourself. And it's also not continuing to beat yourself up over some mistake or anything like that. It's not looking at something that needs to be done differently and then feeling that. It's looking at a situation and wishing it could be different, but knowing that it can't be. So let me stop blabbering and see if that is useful to you, Zikmat. I'll give time for the chat for you folks typing to type. How you doing? How you doing? You smell gassy. Zikmat says on local, she says that that is helpful, helping her examine the past situations I'm so energetically consumed by. Yeah, that sounds like shame to me. Not necessarily true, Ivan. Ivan says something interesting. He says that the thing about regret is that you should not regret things outside of your control. Well, that's not true. You shouldn't feel guilty about things outside of your control, nor should you feel shame ever. But regret you can. So, for example, the Holocaust. Is it wrong for me to regret that the Holocaust happened? No, and I have no part in it. It's not connected to me in any way. I didn't participate in it. I wasn't alive then. I didn't encourage it. I share no responsibility whatsoever for the Holocaust. But can I regret the Holocaust? Of course. When I read the history on that, I hear the stories and stuff. I wish things could have been different. That's regret. And there's nothing unhealthy about that. Um, regret, like I say, there's no such thing as unhealthy regret, because it, if a person believes that they're experiencing unhealthy regret, that's actually shame. So it's not regret. Regret is just looking at a situation and saying and wishing it could be different. That's it. Um, that's regret. Shame, on the other hand, is directed at the person himself or herself, so it's never constructive when applied to people. Now, in the past, it used to be like real early on in Last Symptom Land, I would talk about how shame is never constructive. Well, I need to be more specific. It's never constructive when it's directed at people, because the emotion of shame says that something is without value. It's completely devoid of value. Now, is there anything in life where that healthfully applies to something? And the answer is yes. Behaviors, actions, decisions. See, a behavior of mine might actually be completely devoid of value. So it's appropriate to say what you did is shameful. It is never appropriate, however, to say you should be ashamed of yourself. So let me repeat that. There are situations where it is healthy and appropriate to say what you did is shameful. That is to say, devoid of value. But because shame means that a thing is devoid of value, it's never appropriate to direct it at a person, because there's no such thing as a person being devoid of value. I hope that makes sense. So that's the qualifier. Shame is never constructive when directed at people, but shame is a legitimate emotion, and it can be constructive when it's directed at shameful things. That is to say, things that are completely devoid of value. And when we talk about something being completely devoid of value, we're talking about its existence not contributing positively to life. So, do you see how then it's never applicable to a person? Because there's never such a thing as a person's mere existence not contributing positively to life, to reality. The only thing that shame then can apply to healthfully are to things like behaviors, actions. There's even thoughts, right? There's thoughts that are shameful. So when shame is applied to those sorts of things, it can be constructive, but it's never constructive when applied to people. Let me give you guys an opportunity to say what's on your mind. There's a lag. There's a short lag. So it may seem like I'm sitting here quiet for an unusual amount of time, but that I'm just allowing people an opportunity to talk, to talk in the chat, whichever platform you're on. So I hope I answered your question, Ivan. There's no such thing as healthy regret or unhealthy regret. So that goes back to feelings, right? Feelings are never good or bad, right or wrong. And regret fits into that. The only There's only one emotion that is never constructive or never healthy and is illegitimate, which is interesting. There's only one emotion that human beings experience, that we as human beings experience, that is illegitimate, non-constructive, which means never constructive and never healthy. That's shame when directed at human beings. If you're feeling shame about something that you've done, then that can be constructive if it's something that's devoid of value. See some new folks on YouTube. Giving everybody a chance to type their own thoughts here. Oh, but what I was going to say to Ivan is that then regret, there's no such thing as unhealthy regret. It's just a feeling. But as a feeling, it's communicating a message to us the same way that shame does, same way that guilt does. They have a purpose. Looking forward to getting to watch this back later and just seeing how the quality of everything is on YouTube, Rumble, Locals, and seeing in what ways I can maybe improve on these live streams moving forward. Zigmat on Locals says can't regret result in feelings of deep sadness. Yeah, sure. Again, I'll use the example of like thinking back to the American Indian and the way that they were treated. I have no connection to that. I wasn't alive. I'm not responsible for what happened or anything like that. But when I think about the treatment, I mean, I read these stories. Last summer, 2 summers ago, I was reading this book called The Frontiersman, told all about the historical atrocities that happened. We're talking about to women and minor children, and it's heart wrenching. And yes, that makes me sad. Um, Again, I regret, for example, that human beings can treat other human beings in the way that they do in these horrific, unthinkable ways. I regret that. And I'm not connected to it. I haven't treated people like that. I've never bashed somebody's head in with a rifle butt or anything like that, but I read about it and I know it's happening out there in the world and I regret it. It makes me sad. But I'm not guilty. I don't feel any guilt about it because I haven't done that. And shame, of course, I recognize it is a shameful behavior. Those are shameful things. But, I don't experience that myself. Ivan says, got to head out now. Mr. Brian. Mr. Brian. No, you don't have to call me Mr. It's just Brian with my friends, Ivan. But I appreciate it. And thanks for dropping in here today. We'll keep this up moving forward on Mondays, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will continue to use this streaming service here because it's pretty nifty. Did that answer? What do you think about that answer, Zigmat, on Locals? By the way, if you want to join our locals group, it's thelastsymptom.locals.com in your browser, or you can just download the really nifty locals.com app from the App Store and then search for The Last Symptom by Brian Barnett within. And you can, we have these sorts of discussions all week long, don't we, folks? Give you guys a little moment to chat at me. Tell you, doing something like this is kind of intimidating. Knowing that I'm not just in the safety and the privacy of our locals group, but knowing that I'm streaming out to YouTube and Rumble also, and I see you folks there. It's intimidating, a larger audience. Gonna have to be on my best behavior. All right, folks. Well, I see somebody just come into locals. Like I said, I was gonna keep this kind of abbreviated, but we're 40 minutes in. But let's go ahead and wind things down. We've gotten to test this new streaming service out pretty good. I want to go to YouTube and Rumble and see how this turned out. Of course, I'll be back on locals to catch up with everybody, all of our members there. Zigmat says, what I understood is when you said that you love regret, that you honor regret as a sign of a lived life full of growth and change. Is that right? Yeah, yeah. I guess that's a good way of saying it. It's just remember, let's go back to guilt. It has a very specific purpose. What guilt says is what you did is wrong. Therefore, the purpose of guilt is to promote change. It's our internal conscience telling us that what I did is not right, or what I didn't do is not right. And so the feeling is it's the conscience trying to prompt change. Once a person makes an adjustment and that change is implemented, guilt does not continue to harass a person. People confuse that, don't they? I mean, you hear a lot of people talking like, I've lived with guilt for 50 years. But for 50 years, they haven't repeated that behavior. So it can't be guilt, because once guilt serves its purpose, it goes away. Shame doesn't go away, though. So what is happening there? What is happening with a person who did something wrong, never repeats that again, but 50 years later, they're talking about being still ridden with guilt? Are they ridden with guilt? They can't be. It's shame. What they've done is they've used the bad thing that they did to feel bad about themselves. And remember, shame is any time that negative feelings are directed toward ourselves, as if we're the problem. So when you hear people talking about, carrying guilt for 40 years or something like that, we know that that's not guilt, because they're not still doing that behavior. They're confusing guilt. No, let's say it this way. They're confusing shame for guilt. And this is, almost everybody I talk to does this, but it's part of recovery. Part of recovery is learning to distinguish between guilt and shame, understanding what they do, why they exist, how they affect us. Regret, on the other hand, hi Penny on locals. Regret, on the other hand, does not necessarily have to also include feelings of sadness, feelings of guilt, feelings of shame, any other negative feelings. So, for example, You know, if you look at something historical that you had no part in, you're just reading about it. You can regret that something happened in history without being connected to it at all. You don't feel anything. It's just, I wish that could be different. At the same time, in a more personal sense, like when I'm thinking back to, my marriage and the way I behaved and the way things turned out there, um, I have a deep sense of regret about that. But it's not robbing me of my contentment day by day. You know, I paid my dues. I paid my dues, and I made things right. The way I did that was that I got healthy. I took the bad experience and I used it for good. And so while I regret that I regret what I put people through, I regret that whole situation. I wish it could have been different. But I'm not using it to beat myself up. I'm not still carrying guilt around because remember, guilt goes away once it's served its purpose. It served its purpose in my experience, and now there's no need for it. But this regret is something I'm always going to live with, right? So every time I think back, I'll think, boy, I regret what I put those people through. I wish that could have been different, but it can't be. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's wind down. If you just come in, Penny, anybody else coming in behind you, uh, be sure to watch this live stream from the beginning. I've made some changes, and I think we're going to do it this way moving forward. Not at this time, but what I mean is we're going to stick to the original 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our live streams, but this is streaming out to a couple other platforms, and I've talked today, earlier on in the stream, about how we're going to do that moving forward, and how we'll continue to keep things private for our personal group here on Locals. Penny had some obligations today. Well, hey, Penny, haven't got to talk to you a lot lately, but you hang in there and chin up, and we look forward to a full update when your life is in a place where you're able to do that. Until then, stay strong, stay positive. We're thinking about you. And that's all I'll say about that for now. So I'm going to go ahead and wind down, folks. Thanks for joining me today on this live stream, and I'll catch up with you all on our Locals group. Okay? Ciao.